Okay, now I'm going to try another. I did a review of a class on M&A and corporate finance. Let's get back to project finance. And I do so many, you know, videos on all these modeling aspects and everything else, but I also have an online class that just goes through project finance in general, and I do some very simple kind of Excel in this. So we agreed to do a course, and we agreed to go over a whole bunch of different projects, including social infrastructure projects like hospitals or prisons and police departments and universities and schools. And then we also talked about discussing an airport and a toll road and a water project and a wind project and some high-tech projects. And that's pretty cool. And we wanted to do this with a little bit of a focus on Africa, but when I'm making this video, I'm going to kind of do it every, all together. Now I'm going to go through and just practice. This is almost more half practice, half review. Uh, Here's how I start. I start with some a couple of famous case studies. I'm going to use that throughout. Double Euro Tunnel, Ras Lafan. They're old case studies. They're old case studies. Some toll road projects, some solar projects. I'm going to use them, and I don't care anymore. Oh, you got to keep the case studies right up to date. What bull crap! You can really learn from some of the old ones, and I'm going to emphasize how you should really make a diagram. I'm going to talk in the first kind of little part here about availability payments and what they really come from, and we'll try to understand really what the IRR and the DSC are. I have a idea. And my idea is that there's project finance and corporate finance, and a lot of people have it completely separate. And I wish more, I don't really care, but I think it would be good for corporate finance people to really get into project finance, because a corporation is really a portfolio of different projects. And if you see how people get obsessed with IRR on the project and IRR on the equity, and understanding when really understanding risks, and then you apply it to a corporation, you can really improve your corporate financing a lot. And the opposite, it goes the other way as well. We need to come up with better performance measures and everything else. So the next session, the second session, we'll go through. I kind of interrupted myself a little bit, excuse me. Some social infrastructure projects and risk allocation and value for money, and the importance of the off-taker, which will really be somewhere else a little bit, and some other issues. And then we'll go through traffic studies, and I'm going to go through a couple of toll roads and airports and a little bit ports maybe, and some understanding really the difference between these projects, because some of them have history and some of them don't have history. It's such an obvious thing, really, when you think about it, but it's absolutely crucial. A lot of this stuff, when you really go through it, is so obvious. And then why'd you use different ratios for an airport, really, or should you, than a different one? Whatever I said. Now, understanding development risks and development fees for me is a really big deal too. Okay, and I think it's not just about that. It's about all of finance. And in all of finance, there are boring projects, boring companies, and they're the best companies. Boring is good. The banks love boring. Investors love boring. They can make predictions. They can make valuations. They get dividends. Oh, boring is great. But to get to boring, you have to develop. You have to be innovative. to get to this wonderful state where your life is nice and calm, which I've never got to. Oh, I want to so badly. How do we get there? What's really a development cost, and why should we put development fees in projects? And I've kind of have different opinions. They better not be arbitrary. They better come from some where they are real, but just how much they should be is a big question. And then I'm going to go through kind of A to Z on a little bit of renewable energy, okay, and what's levelized cost. And I'm going to integrate this one. I think obviously I thought I might be able to do this in one session. There's no way. It's going to take a couple of different videos to kind of go through this class. And it's obviously an advertisement a little bit for you. And finally, we'll talk about some oil projects, commodity price projects, and have some other things. Now, when I do this, my I am so desperate to figure out how to make these online sessions not torture. It's so hard for me. You don't know. I look at the computer. I have no idea if people are watching, listening to me, or watching some kind of other video, or what in the heck they're doing. They could be doing anything, sleeping like this. If we make them too long, it'll be a disaster. I desperately beg for people to interrupt me and to have some dialogue. It just doesn't work if you can't have this. These classes are not like this stupid video that you'll turn off and get completely bored stiff by. We're going to have some muting, whatever. I had another one like that. Okay, and I'm going to skip over the comments, and then we'll go to the definition. This is the place to start, and you can this was supposed to be PPP, and I've said this before. I love this definition of PPP, perpetual pending project. That's really what it is. The person, of course, was from, I think he was from Price Waterhouse in Ghana, who told me that. Really good guy. There could also be purchasing power parity. That's PPP. At the virus for this pandemic, there was paycheck protection program and public-private partnership, whatever it means. This can mean just about anything, and I'm going to keep going to get worked up about this terminology. Is a danger. It'll make you go backwards. It'll make you understand some of the really key ideas about valuation and about risk and about making an investment. And the policy questions, which are all so absolutely interesting. It'll make you kind of go backwards. So some oil projects, toll projects, with traffic with, without traffic risk, electricity projects, prisons, hospitals, they've all been called PPP projects, okay, whatever, okay. And this, I get to talk about this kind of stuff, and this PowerPoint maybe isn't so bad. I mean, I usually don't just go through boring old PowerPoint slides, but anybody who thinks finance is anything close to a science has got to have their head examined. The more I study it, the more you realize it's like medicine before Louis Pasteur. It's like whatever Koch in Germany. It's like electricity before Faraday, when they didn't have any idea what it really was. I already said that corporate finance. You know, if we want to get into finance, project finance is a fantastic way to start. So I'm sure the corporate finance people turn it off. And here's the basic premise of any finance: unless you get some money from the sky, unless you're some rich, lucky person who inherits a whole bunch of money without wasting it, if you want to get paid, you got to make an investment in education, an investment of time, an investment in gambling, an investment in whatever, a house to get some rent. If you want to consume some stuff, you've got to make an investment. Even companies that have got so lucky and so rich. They make investments. Google, Apple, they even make investments. Amazon makes a ton of investments, okay? And the fundamental question behind all of this, and it's the fundamental question in project finance, and it's ignored too much in corporate finance. I'm really babbling on a lot, but I don't care. I'm gonna if it's a little slow, you can turn off the video. You know, when I looked at my son's program, yeah, I looked at his lectures. He had some kind of private equity class in his MBA program that all of these people, if you know, it's a University of Chicago where they bid on the projects. I'm not bragging about him at all. He bid, and the highest bidding course. Oh, the most valuable is this private equity. I want to be a private equity person who's going to get all this money. And I looked at all the notes. There was not one mention of rate of return on invested capital. There was not one mention of assessing an investment by looking at the actual return that investment is going to be made. Of course, there was some discussion about IRRs are getting rich and getting all this value and, making a zillion whatever return. But the question about whether a company can really earn a rate of return that's so fundamental in project finance. It's where we start, it's where we end. We look at equity IRR, project IRR, debt IRR, everything. Shareholder debt IRR, subordinated IRR. Everything is about the rate of return that's reasonable. And when you bid on a project, you're bidding on an IRR. It's a really good place to start. Okay. Oh, enough of all of this, really. In corporate finance, we don't have history. We do have history. In project finance, no history. Understand just how important history is. Corporate finance, and there's only one theory in finance that is pretty good, and that's Modigliani and Miller and all these people who say, "Oh no, I had this class in Asia. They say, oh no, it's not proven. It's not. Who cares about that? It's a philosophical idea that you should split the fundamental economics of a project or a company from the way it's financed, and that includes contracts and everything else. You've got to make sure it's really there. In project finance, you can argue, oh, Modigliani and Miller isn't right. Wow, what a ridiculous thing. But it is true that in project finance, here's where debt comes in. It's more of a psychological thing. If somebody else is loaning you money and putting 80% of the money behind a project, and that person is independent and doesn't really give a crap about you, and they don't get paid, that is a big deal. It's a stamp of approval. It's a verification that your investment is okay. So it really is a big deal, the debt financing. Corporate finance, successful companies, you want to keep growing, growing, growing. You're never going to pay back the debt if you grow. Of course you won't. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to just keep borrowing more and more and more. And the bank is supposed to say, let's look at your balance sheet and your debt to EBITDA ratio and a couple of other things. It's pretty good. And we think you're a good company, so we'll put some money in there. In project finance, everything is, of course, about cash flow and whether you pay off all the debt. Oh, corporate finance, there's no earnings there, is there? There's no PE ratio, EV to EBITDA ratio. You do this without understanding what the returns are underneath these things. If you don't earn a return, you're not going to get any of these ratios, but they love to just throw these things away around. In project finance, it's a lot pure. Equity IRR is the metric. DSCR measures the buffer and the risk. So when we go through all of these, we'll go through some of the ideas. And now, the place to start, and this really bugs me. I'm glad I get to moan a lot. I get to moan a lot about a lot of things. But these defining project finance is only availability-based projects or only roads, or whatever. There are all sorts of projects. Real estate could be projects. Technology, telecom used to be project finance, it was a disaster. Commodity prices you could have in projects. So some projects could get their money every time we look at a project. It is such crap. Nobody does this, I swear. Everything in project finance should start with how you get your money, and how you get your money has some risks in it. And in real estate, you've got volume risk because you've got occupancy risk that we know. My brother's hotel has had nobody in it in Peru for a year now. Not a year, since this pandemic, whatever. A technology project, and it also has price risk because you got to change the prices when everybody else is competing. You can have both price risk. If you've got an oil project, you probably can sell oil somewhere, but the price you get for it might be very variable. Mining, refining, and mining, same kind of thing. You have these margins in refinery, but you probably can sell the petrol or gasoline or whatever. Then there's volume risk, which, if you have a toll road, the government might give you a price that's kind of inflating. On an airport, they'll give you a landing fee, or even renewable energy, they'll give you a flat price. But the risk is volume. And in infrastructure and airports, it's traffic volume, but it's very, very different in those two kind of projects. And then we have these wonderful PPP projects, or availability payment projects, or capacity payment projects. They're all basically the same, but you got a fixed price. And you can eliminate basically the quantity risk, except for getting an availability penalty. And you think, that's beautiful, that's really safe. But what you've really done sometimes, and maybe more often than you realize, is you've converted all these other economic risks into political risk. That's my argument, because if you turn out to have built a project that makes no economic sense, the government's going to catch up to you one day. Maybe not all governments, and maybe if you bribe people enough, you won't. But they all have different kind of risks. Okay, so we'll talk about some. This is a little bit geared to Africa, but that doesn't matter, of course. What does matter in a minute is the policy arguments about, and they're very interesting. I'm going to use cases really from around the world, the airport and all that, and do some toll roads and healthcare and everything else. And I'm not an expert at all of these, and you'll see how I think about them. And you might criticize me, and that would be great. If you give me some comments and yell at me, I'd love it. That's what the course will really be about, because these issues are not always well defined. They get into wonderful policy. Should we make all our prisons private and give people the prison investors a strong incentive to get tough on crime or something like that, Okay, I've got a lot of slides, and now I'm going through slides, something I rarely do. I hate PowerPoint slides. I'm shitty at making them, you can see. Okay, here's one. Now let's start defining project finance the way I define it. I found this thing. This was in the term sheet. This said in this term sheet, there shall be no recourse against stockholders of the investor, i.e., SPV of shareholders, for any liability in this agreement. So you cannot, if you don't have cash flow, and if this project itself can't independently pay off the debt of a project, that's how you define non-recourse debt. Now, I always have different ways to define it. I have a daughter. I love her very much. Not that young anymore. I wish she would be non-recourse. She still has to email me sometimes. I'm running out of a little money here. There's no parent guarantee. That's when it's really non-recourse. I made a big investment in her, and it's paid off. It's been a great investment. Okay, not monetarily. That investment I've made at one time. How do I say this? I'm the sponsor. I made that investment and I want to stop making that investment and let that investment pay itself off, and she's got to pay our debts off too. All right. So the other thing, I contrast a corporation really to define project finance. I say we should make a corporate finance versus a project finance. Here's a counter example. The city of Detroit. I'm not sure if it's bankrupt anymore. It was bankrupt. Here's some stuff in Detroit. These are like projects. I count the city here as a corporation and these little things projects. The city has a history. And this city of Detroit, that will still be on the map, I think. Probably, even though it's bankrupt, it'll still be on the map. It's got an undefined future. These little things, they'll go out of business one day and they'll all be replaced. But that will stay there, just like a family. These people, this is from the Roman times, they're not here anymore, but their family may be still here, and it goes on and on and on. And this family has a long history. These things are projects with different risks and different profiles, and maybe one day they're getting independent from their parents, okay? And here's, I'm going to try to, instead of just make my silly little examples, I'm going to try to put the real terms from term sheets. So I want to make the biggest point you can make about project finance. And if you understand this fundamental point about project finance, and you understand that there's a conversion date, which is the COD date, commercial operation date, and that's when you switch from being a construction investment to a payback. That's when you can become sometimes non-recourse. There's an availability period when you can borrow money. There's before the financial close period, there's a development period. And here is the big point. And it's the big point about it's the point about just about anything in finance, not in the world, but in finance. There are some things that are boring and are easy to value and easy to interpret. And there are other things that depend on probability and that are highly, highly risky. And a project goes through different phases, and at one time it's risky, and then it becomes boring. And think of your life. When you had your dating period, oh, your life was pretty exciting. You went on dates, you went to the pubs, the bars, and you might have made an investment in a date. Here they made an investment. The chance of this investment, and you might have said, what's my rate of return on my investment in a date? I'm not talking about anything bad. I'm talking about, well, is it going to lead to a happy marriage and then a boring life? Just go peacefully and everything else. That's a person, but it's really a person going through different phases in your life, okay? We all know that, and everybody has their little examples. This is mine. I think this, if you really make an assessment of whether this is going to last in this, you're kind of crazy, but this is very risky. And then you go through, and if this dating period works well, you get engaged, you pay a commitment fee if you're the man for this ring. That's a fee you pay, and you make all your promises right here. Oh no, I'm gonna promise everything. I'm gonna be faithful to you forever. Then all that stuff. I'm gonna love you forever. Oh yes, sure. This usually people don't fight with me about this. They should. I don't know why. Maybe my idea in this is so silly anyway. But this is when you sign contracts. In project finance, you sign all your contracts at the financial close. And when you have made it through this development period, the value of your project skyrockets. And the assessment of a project during the development period should really be based on probabilities. It should not be based on IRRs and the same sort of thing. And that's in any finance. In any finance, it's like that. And then once you have your promises, your contract signed, then you pay all your wedding costs and all that stuff. Okay. You borrow other people's money. Okay. And then you hit your financial close, you try to pay back some of the money, and you go, and in the first few years of your marriage, you have no idea if it's really working out well because you didn't have any real history. You just had all your little promises, and then you start living in a house, and you go, oh God, or you go, I'm so happy, or I'm not so happy, and you don't really know that for a little bit of time, and then after that, the risk goes down, whether it's a crappy situation or a good situation, you know what's going to go on. Okay, maybe you have to do something about it. And at the end, you're finished. You don't just keep going on and on and on like a corporation. That's project finance. Okay, so you can read all these fancy, silly little definitions. I should have put them in. You know what? So what I do on this one is sometimes I go to the chapters. Okay, and I go to chapter number 2. These are all these things that you can get. And in chapter 2, I put some project finance articles, and you can even look at this overview of project finance. And in this overview of project finance, this is an old one, but they have the definition. The raising of funds on a limited or non-recourse basis to finance the economically separable capital investment to providers of funds, blah, 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 blah. Financing of a particular economic unit in which the lender is satisfied to look initially at the cash flow of the earnings of the economic unit as a source of funds from which the loan will be repaid. The project involves the creation of a legally independent project finance company with non-recourse debt. Okay, that's okay. Legally independent project company, that's the SPV. Equity and debt for the purpose of financing a single investment, usually with a limited life. Maybe this is the closest one, but really, does it really get there? Sorry if I like my little stupid diagram, okay? And here, I just want to comment on WACC for a minute. In project finance, we're obsessed with the rates of return. We could measure a project IRR, which we'll get to, and compare that project IRR to the weighted average cost of capital. The cost of capital is the definition of cost of capital is the minimum rate of return you will accept for a given level of risk. Okay? The minimum, the risk, the rate of return, it's an opportunity cost. But what it's really, the problem here is your risk here is enormous. You can't even measure it with really a rate of return. You have to do a little bit of a decision tree, excuse me. And when you do or not a decision tree, a probability tree, maybe I should call that. You should see, well, how much are we paying? And what's our probability of getting through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3? I've compared this to this virus a whole lot. And then when you got all your contracts signed, your risk changes dramatically. And how can you have the same WACC here and here? And then you start borrowing a lot of money. It's senseless to really have a WACC here when you're just borrowing. Maybe your borrowing reaches a peak here, and then your debt starts going down. The WACC is supposed to have a constant debt to capital, but then the rate of return you need here is dramatically different than here, and here, and certainly here. Okay, so to say that you can use classic WACCs, when you really think about this, the WAC is developed for a boring company that's got essentially constant risk. It is not, it doesn't apply to a drug company that's trying to make a vaccine for the coronavirus. It really doesn't. That investment is based on probability spending and chance of a big success at the end. Okay? So I've got another, this is just an example of the sorts of things you do in the development period. So these are some general ideas. Now, I'm going to talk about this as well. I can't seem to get off these slides. I go crazy when you try to impose one model that might work in one place that has some financing costs and some risk, and you try to, and some government, whatever, ability to repay and other things, and you try to apply that in different countries, it can be a disaster. And here's what I suggest. When you make a diagram, you start with where you're going to get the money. And you put a little, I put a green one here for the green is when the money's coming in, the red is when the money's going out. And some people put money in and get it out. Some people just get it out. So the O&M contractor can be the shareholder, and you can get much more complicated. And you put in the bubbles, you put in the bubbles, you put who the off taker is, okay? And in project finance, you're essentially, all these contracts, and this varies, depending on the specific project. But, sorry, here is where you sign all the contracts. And particularly in an availability contract, particularly in that, you'll have these contracts will be really essential. Again, in other projects, perhaps an oil project or toll road, maybe these are important always, but maybe some of these are less important. They can be more important. Maybe the off taker, you don't even have an off taker, but you get revenue from somewhere, and you get price and volume, and you should understand when you have a diagram like this. Now these are contracts. I don't know if I already said that. These are contracts. These are the off-takers. How you write the contractor, who the off-taker in the contract is enormously important. What kind of risk is left over? There's no way. I remember one lady, she's really nice in Singapore, said, in Singapore, you might think about this. We want to get rid of all risk. I want to mitigate. I want to get rid of every single risk. No risk left. Okay, if you do that, you have a risk-free project. You shouldn't get any return. Nobody should get a return. Or maybe if you're passing off the risk to somebody else, but maybe these investors and these lenders shouldn't get a return if you passed all the risks off to somebody else up here. Okay? And that, if you can make a diagram well, and you know me, maybe you don't know me, project finance uh, 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 is, I do too many models. I couldn't get the words out. It's getting a little late. I'm getting a little loopy. Okay, but I love to make models, not diagrams. And I'm always intimidated by these diagrams. But if you can make a good diagram, and if you can make a picture where that risk just comes out at you, you really do that. That's a key part of everything. And in almost every case that I have, you want to show this. Now, I started to put these diagrams in my models. I'm not going to open the model right now. I think my whatever. I just don't want to open it. Maybe there'll be a problem with opening it, and I've done this so many other places. And you can kind of make a diagram. Is this O&M contractor the investor? And let's look at the rate of return these people are earning before their financing, after their finance. Let's look at the IRR, the internal rate of return, the growth rate in your money. We're going to define all of that really carefully and all that in these projects. So uh, I, if you can make them, I think it's a really big deal. In this case, it's a solar project, and you can't mitigate the sunlight. So I made some silly little picture of the sun, kind of emphasizing here the only way you can mitigate that is by doing a whole bunch of resource studies. Okay. Here are here's some diagrams from all these books. Okay, I collect these project finance books. This diagram is pretty good for one reason and one reason only, and in that they put a ring fence. And that's if you would put a ring fence around this one, you put a ring around here, it would be not a very good shaped ring. Okay, it would be right around here. It would not include the lenders. The lenders can go bankrupt. The lenders can be Lehman Brothers and you still get paid back. It would not include the equity holders. The equity holders could be Enron and go bankrupt. This is protected. These equity holders could be well, I shouldn't say that exactly. They could be a little bit slimy or have bad, whatever, partnerships or whatever. I shouldn't have said that, because you want good equity holders. That was a bad thing to say. But the ring fence, that's what's in the risk definition. And there are two things about it. Number one, it protects you against the risk. But number two, and this is maybe a bigger deal. Number two, this ring fence, this ring fence defines the risks. You can isolate the risks. So maybe you say, no, I don't have a parent guarantee. It's very, very risky, and that could be the case because you can't go and beg your parents up here for all the money again. But the banks can look at this and say, I know what's in the cost. I know where you're getting the money, and I don't have to look at some balance sheet with God knows what kind of investments, idiotic investments you're going to make and everything else. I can see everything. The transparency kind of argument here. But this diagram really, in a way, sucks because this is power output. This should be put where you're getting the money. Start with the stupid money. Put these guys down here. They're getting some of the money and show that they're putting some money in and getting some dividends out. They're putting some money in, getting some dividends out. And show the contracts. And maybe, okay, it's not that bad a diagram. This is even worse. And nobody starts. If I want a picture of the risk. I want this diagram to say something other than just being some mushy piece of whatever. I want to see where you're getting the money, where the volume risk is, where the revenue risk is. I want to see if this price that the government is charging is really high. I even want to see what kind of returns this company and these people are making to see if this is outlandish. And then as a bank, I can say, oh no, this doesn't sound good. It sounds like they're taking too much from the government. I want to see some of that stuff. I know it's a different way to look at things. And there are more diagrams. Is this the same one? Oh, this is the same one. See, I'm going through this. I'm going to have to change my slides, aren't I? Okay, this must be some toll roads. And yeah, the toll. Okay, where's the traffic risk? Where's the equity and the debt up here? Okay, the toll operator, and it goes down here. I want to see where the money comes from. I want to see who that's okay. It's got some contract, I guess, but please make these diagrams really say something about the risk and understand something about the project. Okay, so I'm gonna go through one more little case study. This is my argument for why project finance is can be whatever a success. How's that? This is Ras Laffan. This is Qatar, not Qatar, not Qatar, not Qatar. Okay, here's the sea, and there's a whole bunch of gas. There's more gas underneath the sea. Iran is on the other side of this, and you can get this gas out of the sea apparently really cheaply. Maybe you just got to stick a little straw and suck it out. You bring the gas over here, and then these things make the gas into a liquid, and then you take that gas, you put it in a boat, and you can send it around to the rest of the world. Okay, so you can see in Qatar, they're having the World Cup now, but they were now this I couldn't get it before 1996. Before 1996, I don't think they were even rated. Maybe I could be wrong, but they were below. This is BA, BB, not BAA, BA1. It's not. It's close to being triple B, but they were below investment grade. They were just investment grade here, and in '96 they weren't. And that's when people kind of knew there was some gas coming on here. I asked a lot of people about what was in Qatar back then, and they said maybe a few fishermen. You know, that's all there was. Okay, they certainly didn't need any gas to heat their homes or anything like that. And now I'm sure it's changed a little bit because of the gas prices and because they spent too much maybe on the World Cup or something like that. They might not be the top anymore, but these were the top countries, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Bermuda. These are the top. Singapore. Oh, that's pretty good. That's really amazing. Okay. And here, let's look at our diagram. Okay. And in our diagram here, and this diagram, maybe not. I should have made a circle maybe around this. So maybe I criticized things a little too much, but I'm not going to stop ever making my arrogant kind of comments. Uh, they got Korea and Japan to put some ships here and take some of this gas. And that's a really big deal. But they only made a contract for the quantity. They did not make a contract for the price. The price they linked to the price of oil. So this project took some oil price risk. Okay, if the oil price went down, they get less money. Okay, the price was linked, but they did have an offtake contract. That's a really, really big deal because the banks really like that. If the banks think, we're sure to get a contract for the volumes, we won't get stuck. Okay, and then if you could imagine how it was back here, can you imagine the state of Qatar? They were one of the sponsors. They called somebody in New York and say, "Hello, I'm from Qatar and I want to build this plant. And let's get on the phone." And the person on the phone in New York says, "Woo? Qatar? Qatar? I don't know. I've never heard of this." And then they look and say, "You're rated below investment grade. Sorry, can't do it. We can't get a pension fund to make an investment. Sorry, uh, uh, you gotta just stay being fishermen, okay?" But instead, here's what they did. They got Mobil to be a co-investor, and they made it a project finance. So the state, the New York pension fund or whatever, is not investing in the state of Qatar, who could do things like waste money on getting the World Cup. I shouldn't have said that. Whatever. They could just make all sorts of crazy projects. No, they want a ring around this. They want the ring fencing. Okay. And they got Mobil Oil. This was before Exxon and Mobil were together. Okay. And even though the state was the major investment, the fact that Mobil was an investor was a really, really big deal. You got credible investors, and that's why this little project, even though I stylize it and probably get a couple of things wrong about this project, whatever. It illustrates the things. And then they got a really good contractor. And if they signed a fixed price contract that makes sure that they're not just going to sit here and waste money and have big cost overruns on this, the EPC contractor with a track record signed a fixed price contract and guaranteed that you'd get rid of the construction cost overrun risk. And then they needed to get the oil supply, and they had some kind of agreement that and got completely comfortable with the cost. I don't know what kind of supply agreement it was, to tell you the truth. Sorry about that. And then they would have some good O&M contractor. Maybe it's associated with these people, and these people would have to correspond with these people. And the O&M contractor, if they screwed up, if the O&M contractor screwed up, and some of these things weren't working properly, and the efficiency of all these things wasn't good, you could put penalties and incentives in this O&M contractor, so you can make sure they meet this one. So there should have been almost a line between these two contracts. That's called a back-to-back contract. And you can see now you can put a ring around the risk. You can put a ring around the risk. The lenders and the sponsors, they're out of it, but having Mobil in there is a big deal. And once you put a ring around it, you can see the risks. You can really see this. So I've talked about this enough. So they spent 3.5 billion, and that's how many tons? 70% Qatar, 30% Mobil Oil. There were the construction contracts. They were able to raise the all of the cost. This is like a sources. This is like the uses of funds, and then the sources, and they were able to get it because there was some equipment and from the UK and the US and Italy. They got some export credit agency financing. This is the Exxon, and I mean the Mobil and the whatever, the state. And the big one is here. They were able to get 1.2 billion out of the 3 billion. They were getting other people's money, and this was rated above investment grade and even A3. Okay, and then it's gone up since then. And that's how they put it together. Now, I'm going to show you just a little bit as we go through these things. So instead of going through a bunch of Excel, I'm just going to tout some of this stuff now. This I made in a course, I remember, in Singapore years and years ago. We just started messing around with macros and messing around with scraping the internet. You don't need to use this Python for. Oh my God, you don't need to do that. You can just get this from the internet. So I've got this little thing called databases, and I go to commodity prices, and you click on that website I have, and you just click on that thing and say, give me all of the files, and I'll give you all the file. And the good news about this one is that you can, oops, I've got a Chinese case here. Okay. And here you can go to this. Oh, that's because of that other file that's open. I better close that one. All right. And you can go to this one. And the big deal here, and that's what I kind of did, the big deal is you can uh, uh, go to the websites, and sometimes the URLs change. And when you go to the website, it just isn't automatically going to download this. Now, the last time I did this, in July and the world's going by. It's September. Well, oh, and they even give you a forecast. So if you press this button, what happens is it goes to the internet. And when it goes to the internet, and sometimes I don't like to do this when I'm making a video, but when it goes to the internet, it downloads the data. And so when I have a class like this, that I hope I'm not kind of giving away the class, I'm really doing this for people who've actually taken the class. And we're going the class would be less expensive than some of the modeling classes. How's that? And now we get both the updated forecast, I hope, and we certainly get so we get the last prices. And here's now what's happened very lately is kind of cool. So then you just do a little bit of whatever. You do a little bit of I remember this class. There were some people from, I think they might have been from Qatar. I'll pretend they were from Qatar. They came to Singapore and they took first class in one of those fancy airlines, and I took the economy class and whatever. So right now I'm comparing palm oil, and we just make an index and we make the graph flexible. That has nothing to do with macros or anything else. And if we put the gas they sold to Japan, if we put that here, you can see that this is exactly from these Qatar contracts, probably, and that is when there was a drop off in 2008 of the oil price. Well, this happened a month later. You can see it's always happening kind of a month later. There's a very high correlation, 91%. The only time it kind of didn't happen is here. I guess it happened a little bit, didn't it? But not quite. Now, as we proceed, if you watch another video in this series, as we proceed, you'll see that natural gas is not just some boring thing. It's behind electricity prices. It's behind the value of solar energy and wind energy. It's behind any forecast of merchant prices you're going to do. It's important in its own right. It drives a lot of, if you're making a methane plant or something. So it's a fascinating thing. Now, yeah, in the U.S., they made this shale gas that right now none of the people will oppose, and it's very important, okay, politically. And in the old days, there was kind of a correlation between, not exactly, this was the Hurricane Katrina, and there was a correlation. But then when the prices got really high, these people like at Exxon, they said, I'm going to start doing something that I've known how to do for many, many years. I'm going to go and do this fracking business. And maybe they improved the technology, then there's some argument about how much they improved it, or maybe there's just oversupply. These gas prices got really, really low. Is this because of oversupply or technology? I'm repeating myself. And the difference here is just totally dramatic. This is oil price. Let's compare the natural gas in Japan. And I think it's a totally different subject. But if you're good at presenting data, and it's not so hard. This is a question whether it's got a normal distribution or it's kind of got some whatever non-normal characteristics, too much up here and too much over here. I don't know why I mentioned that. Here's the correlation. I don't know what that really tells you. There was this wide gap. And somebody might say, and somebody did say in my class just now, shouldn't there be arbitrage? Shouldn't there be some kind of arbitrage? Because you can take a ship, just like we were saying, and put it in a ship and take it from US to here. And so what happened is the US started recently making these enormous investments in LNG, just like Qatar did. Okay. Uh, and if we now do the really interesting one, which is not Japan or US, I'm going to leave the US here, but I'm going to skip to Europe. And then you kind of have to make sure that these scales are the same. Is it exactly the same? It's not exactly the same. Sorry about that. I should put a little macro here eventually and make it the same. Put an option to make it the same scale. You know, maybe I can do this. So this let's put this one uh, and put it on the primary series. Will that work? Okay. Because what's happened in the world is so fascinating, and it has so many implications for all sorts of project financing that this gap was kind of like it was in Japan. And look here, look at this, look at this. The Right now, the price in Europe is about the same as this really low price in the US. This big competitive advantage the US brags about by having cheap energy, it's not so much there, because then the electricity price is down, solar is less economic, everything happens now. And, oh, I have to make sure this last value went up a little bit, so this last value isn't exactly the same, but it's a little bit pretty much different actually. Okay, but that's some history. Now, if we get back, and now I'm going to finish this part one in just a minute. The big deal about making a risk assessment in this project was that they did all this financing, they eliminated the volume. This was actually of a subsequent project. But the key thing, DSCR, that's the DSCR will define much more and talk about, again, the concept of having a buffer, an alarm clock, or a Google map, and being early for a meeting. That's the DSCR. It's how much your cash is above the amount you have to pay the bank. It was twice as much. You had twice as much cash as you had to pay back the bank, even in downside scenarios. And then you can say, well, how low can the price of oil go before this gets to be one? And they said, well, the price of oil can get all the way down to 11, because it's so cheap to get the gas out of the Gulf. So again, if you let's put the 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 oil price up at the top, and let's put the gas in Japan at the second one, and then I've got to redo this, and put them on the same scale, because when you put them on the same scale, it kind of looks cooler, doesn't it? Maybe it distorts things a little too. I don't know. The price of oil, I don't think is this is the price of gas. Where's the price? This is the price of oil. What is Oh, this is oil and gas. I put the oil is here, obviously, and the price of oil is, even in the worst case, hasn't come down to 11. And that would have to be staying at 11 every single year. It used to be a lot lower. That's when they did the transaction here. And so it's been just, the IRR must have been very, very high on this project. And if the government was the main investor, they did extremely well, and they couldn't have, and they hopefully gave it back to some of those people. They didn't give it to the workers there. Of course, they gave it to the people who live in Qatar. Whatever, I'm not going to get into that. And it was all very well and good. Now, if you look at the later projects, here's what they made: these complicated diagrams that you couldn't figure out. But on each of these diagrams, on each of these little things, you put, what the I hope they did. they're single A. Where's all this? They're single A minus. They're A2. They're not rated. So they tried to put the who they're selling it to and what the rating is, and can you trust the people? So they're looking at that, and they put a little cash flow risks, and that's it. Now that's enough. I'm going to stop there. That's our overview of project finance, and then we'll get into the second part. So this is. Oh, I still hope you take a class. I hope you take another class, maybe if you even you wouldn't take just one on the ideas, and we can really discuss some of the things.